Imagine a world where the pursuit of knowledge destroys what makes us human. In the name of scientific progress, have joined the immoral side of science. In their eagerness to shorten the path and advance years of research, they have committed the vilest, most perverse, and unspeakable atrocities against their own species, where governments, scientists, and doctors, behind locked doors and classified files, secrets waited decades to be revealed. Experiments so grotesque, so perverse, that even history struggles to fully tell their story. Tonight, we explore 5 experiments so frightening, so twisted, they push the boundaries of human morality. This is the top 5 most terrifying experiments in history. Number 5. The Forgotten Children. In the 1940s and 1950s, deep in the Canadian wilderness, something horrifying was happening behind the walls of so-called residential schools. These were places meant to educate Indigenous children, to strip away their culture, their language, their identity. But for some, the lessons were not in classrooms. They were in starvation. Canadian government scientists decided to use these children as human test subjects for nutrition experiments. They divided them into groups. Some received milk, vitamins, and bread. Others were deliberately denied them. Teachers were ordered not to feed the children extra, even if they were hungry. Doctors observed their slow decay. They took blood, measured bone growth, and recorded every symptom of malnutrition, not to save them, but to study them. Their hair fell out. Their skin turned pale. Many stopped growing. They were reduced to biological data, numbers on a chart. Years later, when these experiments came to light, the government called it a scientific misunderstanding. But for the children who never recovered, it was cruelty disguised as research. When science forgets compassion, it ceases to be science at all. Number 4. MK Ultra. The year was 1953. The Cold War was at its peak, and the CIA had one goal: to discover how to control the human mind in order to protect national security. They wanted to create agents who could resist interrogation, erase memories, manipulate information, or even influence enemies without their knowledge. What seemed like a mission of defense turned into a macabre game with human lives. Under the name MK Ultra, they began secret experiments in hospitals, universities, and even prisons. Thousands of innocent people became unwitting subjects. They were drugged with LSD for days or even weeks. Some were locked in soundproof rooms, exposed to strobe lights, electroshock, and hypnosis. Some were told it was therapy. Others had no idea what was happening until their minds broke. One of the most infamous cases was Frank Olson, a government scientist who was dosed without his consent. Days later, he fell from a hotel window. The CIA called it suicide. When MK Ultra was finally exposed in the 1970s, it was already too late. Most of the evidence, thousands of documents, had been burned to ash. What little survived were scattered fragments, haunting traces of a nightmare written in ink and lies. Number 3. Guatemala. It began in 1946 under the guise of public health. American researchers arrived in Guatemala claiming they would fight venereal diseases. But behind their smiles was something unspeakable. Doctors intentionally infected more than 1,300 prisoners, soldiers, psychiatric patients, and even children with syphilis and gonorrhea, without their consent. They scraped open skin and poured the bacteria directly into wounds. In some cases, they used infected sex workers to spread the diseases intentionally. Those who got sick were left untreated, so scientists could observe the natural progression. Out of the victims, over 80 people died, and hundreds were permanently scarred. The reports were hidden for decades, buried in archives. When the truth finally surfaced in 2010, President Obama officially apologized to Guatemala, calling it clearly unethical. But for many victims, it was far too late. Their families never even knew what had been done to them, because the world buried their pain just like their bodies. Number 2. Holmesburg Prison. In the heart of Philadelphia, between the 1950s and 1970s, stood a prison that became something far worse than a place of punishment. It became a laboratory. Inside these walls, over 300 inmates, most of them poor and African American, were promised a few dollars for simple medical tests. They thought it was harmless. A little cream on the skin, maybe a pill or two. But what they didn't know was that they were signing up to become human experiments. Researchers from the University of Pennsylvania and the US Army tested everything imaginable: chemical weapons, radioactive isotopes, and dioxin. The prisoners' backs were covered in blisters, their skin peeled off in sheets. Some lost their sight, others their sanity, all of it, in the name of science and national security. When the truth came out decades later, officials claimed the men had volunteered. Many of those 300 men carried the scars, physical and psychological, for the rest of their lives. Some never made it out of those walls. They said they were studying the effects on skin, but what they really studied was how far a human being can suffer before he stops being human. Number 1. Unit 731. In the frozen wastelands of northeastern China during World War II, there stood a fortress that never appeared on any map. To the outside world, it was known as the Epidemic Prevention and Water Purification Department. But inside, it was something far more sinister. They called it Unit 731, a secret division of the Imperial Japanese Army, led by General Shiro Ishii. Behind its concrete walls, over 10,000 men, women, and children became living test subjects, prisoners of war, Chinese civilians, even Soviet captives. Each one had a number, but no name. They were infected with plague, anthrax, cholera, and syphilis. To study how long it took for them to die. Victims were frozen alive to test hypothermia. Others were dissected while still breathing, without anesthesia, so scientists could observe the effects of disease on the human body in real time. Their screams were never recorded, their graves never marked. Yet, some say the walls still remember the sound. When the war ended, Ishi and his men were never punished. Instead, they were granted immunity by the United States in exchange for their research data that included detailed records of frostbite, dehydration, biological weapon testing, and the progression of deadly diseases inside the human body. Officially, the number of victims remains unknown, but survivors' testimonies and hidden records suggest it may have been over 250,000 lives erased, 250,000 human beings sacrificed on the altar of science. They called it medical progress. But behind the walls of Unit 731 was a hell no God could imagine. Even today, parts of that facility still stand, abandoned, silent, untouched. Locals say that on cold nights, the wind carries faint echoes of what once happened there. Echoes that will never die.